we're gonna get the audio right on this particular go. Okay, so this is the 6th time I've started this audio over. Hope everybody's doing good out there in YouTube land. Salty Texas back with another resin project. So what we're doing today is taking red oak scraps that I had left over, using it in this giant mold, and we're going to make a clear resin bowl using East Coast resin. So here we are mixing everything up in our 2-quart bucket. Not the most sophisticated way of doing it. Had to grip it between my feet only because once you start stirring epoxy for a little bit, it takes its toll on your hands. So here we are with the epoxy pour. Obviously, as you saw by the intro of the video, we had everything already set up. So now we're just layering in the actual epoxy itself, and we didn't add any color or dye to this particular project. I really like the way the oak looks once everything is nice and sanded, so I thought it'd be really cool just to do like a really clear bowl with it. And you can see, you know, that top layer that I put on, that giant round disc that's in there, keeps everything from floating up, because what I want to do is put a scrap piece on the top and then attach the faceplate to it. So here we are about 4.5 hours out of the actual pressure pot itself. Everything is looking pretty good. Real beautiful casting with it. Nothing too crazy. Looks really good. Not a lot of bubbles that I'm seeing in the actual casting itself. And you can see that red oak. It looks just amazing when it's in that epoxy. So here we are, demolded it. Make sure to wear your gloves because that edge of that epoxy is very, very sharp. It will cut the hell out of you. So if you're going to do this, definitely use gloves. And you can see that big waste block that we have there in the middle, as we always do with these projects, trying to save resin. So when I monetize this channel eventually, hopefully one day, we won't have to use those waste blocks so much, and you know, I'll be sponsored so I can get more resin. But anyway, that's way off. So here we go, super glued the scrap piece of pine onto it as we usually do, and now we're just screwing it down with the faceplate. And you'll see here, I had a little bit issue with the faceplate, ended up cracking this piece of pine board, which I was going to initially just take the entire thing off and start over with a new piece, but what I ended up doing was just taking a piece of, or not a piece of, but I just took some more hot glue and glued the absolute hell out of it, and that seemed to work just fine, and I didn't have anything detached. So here we go, got the faceplate on, get everything super glued and hot glued as much as humanly possible, sticking it on our Nova 2 Comet lathe, and we are ready to go. So I've learned a lot of lessons doing these bigger projects. So as you see, we have the entire lathe pushed back up against the workbench to prevent it from dancing all over the lathe, because if you've seen some of my other videos, you've noticed that when I have the actual lathe forward with some of these bigger blanks, the actual piece will dance all over the actual workbench, and that creates a lot of problems. So here we are, getting a lot of good shavings off initially. You can see me just getting absolutely obliterated with all those good ribbons. And as much as I do love those shavings and absolutely love when it does that, it gets kind of annoying when it flies in your face and you're trying to just work and you can't see your actual workspace. So like I stated earlier, or I may not have in the earlier part of the video, I did film this one back in December. You guys won't be watching this until the summertime, but this was around December 20th-ish, somewhere around there. It was very cold in Texas, so here I am. I've got my goggles, I've got my face shield, and I got a bandana as I'm using for a respirator, because I was using a regular respirator, but I had so much condensation due to the weather, and it was just basically fogging up everything that I was doing. So had a lot of issues, at least with that portion of it, which was kind of annoying. So once we got everything kind of in that nice bowl shape that we typically like, then we just came back, and now we're just making the back mortise so we can reverse this on the chuck. And this part went pretty good. Once you get through that initial epoxy layer, you get to that nice pine board, and everything just gets smoothed out with that nice square carbide tool. As you see here, everything's going relatively well. And here we are just measuring up the size of the chuck, making sure everything is nice and flush, so when we do end up reversing it, everything is nice and snug. So once I was happy with the size of the mortise, came back, hit it with that round carbide tool that I love so much. And what I'm learning is, before I kind of figured out what I was doing, I had the actual I would have square type bottoms, but I've learned that, before you go ahead and refresh it on the chuck, go ahead and round the bottom to where you want it to be, so you don't have to come back and mess with it. So that's what we're just ended up doing here, just getting everything round and bottomed out the way that we want to, so we don't have to come back and mess with it. So here we are, reversed on the chuck, everything's nice and tight, got the tailstock secured in there, so we're just getting everything nice and balanced before we start the actual gouging process, which I've learned also make everything nice and cylindrical, or at least get the general shape that you want before you take the tailstock off, because if you don't, when you start gouging, you'll get a lot of dancing, a lot of wobble on the actual plank itself. And there I am again. You can see me just absolutely covered in these shavings, and if you're asking how the hell was I able to see, I was able to see. I just had to come back and take all that off a lot during this particular project. So here we are trying to gouge out this epoxy, and that top layer is initially the big problem. So when you do these big epoxy projects, and it's mostly epoxy, it's a little bit more difficult to cut through with the gouging, with the bowl gouge, as you'll see here. So we'll have a couple of different scenes in the project, as you'll see here in a little bit, where we're just coming through, getting that initial layer, the second layer, third layer, fourth layer, all the way down to the bottom. And here in a little bit, you'll start to notice that I have a little bit of issue with the lip of the bowl. That almost actually flew off my workbench right there. If you just saw that, go back, rewind it, you see it there. So this is a little bit later in the project, once we start to gouge just our basic crater out of it. And now we're just working that edge, and the camera is absolutely getting obliterated with these shavings. It was very cold in the garage, by the way. So I'm from Texas, obviously, and if it gets below 80 degrees, I'm freezing. But in this particular day, the wind was blowing. I had shavings literally just flying all over this particular project. There was, just stuff all over the garage. So you can imagine how cold it was. My hands were freezing. And, some woodworkers will wear gloves. Others, don't recommend wearing gloves. I'm of the mindset, do whatever you want. But my hands were basically just numb as I'm trying to gouge out this bowl, because my hands were absolutely freezing during this particular project, because I hate being cold. But hey, one of these days when the channel blows up, maybe I'll actually have an actual workshop where I can regulate the temperature a little bit better. But until then, this is what we're doing. So here we are a little bit later in the project. Everything's going relatively well, and now I start to work that edge a little bit closer, trying to get a little bit finer cuts near the edge of the bowl so we can actually get that nice lip on it. And for some reason, I have yet to learn my lesson concerning the square carbide tool. Every time this happened, I ended up chipping out the side of the bowl. Here I am moving the banjo, trying to adjust it, thinking everything is going to go nice and smooth, and just chatter all over it. So there it is. Ended up chipping the side of the bowl. Real nasty looking chips. I'm pissed off. I threw my face shield, but just like every other project, you got to come back and work the problem. So here we are with the round carbide tool, getting that nice lip on it, and I'm going, just trying to save as much material as possible. And what I've learned is you got to take that top layer off first before you start hitting it with the carbide tools, at least in my experience, because if you come back with the actual square carbide and it's that fresh top layer of epoxy, you're likely to get a lot more chipping, or at least in my experience. So hopefully I won't do that in the next project, and I'll do a little bit better job. So ended up saving the side of the bowl, which this actually turned out to be a blessing, because I really like the round edge that I put on the lip of the bowl. I think it looks a lot better than that flat square that I was going to do initially. So here we are, basically got the lip of the bowl rounded out the way that we want, and now we're just doing the finishing touches, getting everything gouged as deep as possible, trying to make as much room for stuff that we can put in there, and just eating away at the wall of the actual bowl itself. And we're taking several passes there. You can see we're getting a mixture of epoxy and wood shavings off of the bowl. Coming back, hitting it with that round carbide tool, getting everything nice even on the inner portion of that lip. And then we're just basically just trying to save the bowl as much as possible. And this is ended up being the last pass we'll do on the side, trying to get everything nice and even before we start the sanding process. And by now I'm pretty happy with the overall structure of the bowl by this time in the project. So here, oh, sorry, almost ruined that. So here we are. I don't know what I'm doing here, but okay, here we go. So now we're on to the sanding, which I absolutely loathe sanding. So we do our typical all the way from 340 all the way up to the micro mesh with the epoxy, and this didn't come out as clear as I wanted it to because I was so cold. I just wanted this project to kind of be over. As much as I loved building and cold and doing this project, I really was just like, oh my god, because here I am doing the wet sanding, my hands are freezing. I just was like, I just want this to be over. So here we are hitting it with that wood wax that we love, and it looks pretty clear. We got a good, nice, glossy kind of finish to it, but we could have done a lot better with the sanding. I'll admit that right now. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the way the project turned out. Here we are, just finished, done. Here it is, looking absolutely dead. I like the top lip of that project. By the way, oh, shoddy camera work, but that's what you expect from this channel. So this is the overall finished project. Not too bad. Hope you guys got something out of this. Also, if you made it to this part of the video, leave a comment. I did leave the sound of the actual bowl gouging in this particular project, trying to do something new with the channel. So overall, hope you liked it. I enjoyed doing it. Freezing cold. Hope you guys are having a good summer. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next project. Peace. Okay, so real quick to end this, because it's fucking cold. It's actually snowing and flurrying. Today is December 13th, 2020. Here's the project. Oh my god, my hands are freezing cold. Looks pretty good, not as crystal clear. My sanding could have been way better, but admittingly, I can't feel the tips of my fucking fingers. So, it didn't look as great as it could be. But, hope you liked the project. I gotta get out of here. It's freezing cold. My hands are turning all kinds of cold. So, sorry for the outro. Nobody makes it to this point anyway. So, anyway, hope you liked the project. Don't forget to subscribe. I gotta go, because it's freezing. Oh my god. Okay, bye.